All right, good morning, divas and dudes. Welcome to Powerhouse. Thank you so much for being here. We are still in our seed category. The humble sesame seed is kind of the star of the show. But there's not ever going to be a show with just one star, right? And so, what I want to do today is kind of go over some of the things we've talked about, what makes seeds so powerful, and then we'll do a little bit of assembly of some great ingredients to show you how easy they are to cook with, because always my goal is to help you really apply some of these techniques so that you feel like you've got some recipes and some ways to really add these foods to your eating plan. And Irene brought up such a good question. She's always thinking about what we bring up in class. So I really wanted to share it with you all as we get started. And that is, when we look at adding protein to our diet, what is the best way to do it? And her question was, what if we were to do protein add-ins that weren't a powder? She kind of knows that protein as a powder isn't my favorite. And that's really because I feel like it's a dangerous thought process. And that is to assume that adding this powder and making a drinkable product is better than real food. And so it's a perfect segue into what we're talking about today, because what I really want us to know is how do we use seeds to augment our diet? Because remember, the media has been really good at teaching us what we should do, and especially for an athlete where we're really conscientious or we're fighting the fight of our life if we have a diagnosis like cancer, how do we get the best nutrition? And so often, the health world out there says that protein should come from a shake, and how you do that, making it easy and convenient, is with a whey isolate or even a pea protein. But there are now more and more experts out there that say, you could probably avoid that, and instead, even if you did a shake, what if we were to put in things like dark green leafies, and we were going to put in some seeds, because that's our topic for sure. What else could we put in this shake? And again, I like to chew. The mastication process is super important. Digestion, as well as our satiety factor and our biome. But, if you're in a hurry, size it up. But even if we go this direction and think a shake, I would at least want to make sure that you get all the fiber. So get all in. So what I wouldn't want you to do is a juice. I'm going to give it a little sad face. Juice, because there's oftentimes a juicing system where it presses all the juice out, and then what's left? The pulp. Yes, the fiber and all the solids that make our gut happy, that bring with it some of these really valuable components that you miss when you're doing a shake or a juice. So I say, if we're going to do a super healthy drink in a cup, let's agree that it's got to be all in. Meaning, if you're going to add to your shake some cucumber, keep the skin on. If you're going to add some kale, keep all the kale. We wouldn't just do some kale juice. Definitely add in some seeds. We've talked even about seed butter, and I like this idea. And you might say, well, Suzanne, you don't really chew that much. And that's kind of right? I mean, it's not the whole seed anymore. It's in fact the creamed up seed. And so whenever possible, yeah, we do like to eat the whole seed. But you saw that we did a lot of sesame tahini, and that's going to be a way to use all the value of that seed. So I think it's definitely a great conversation. And when we start thinking about the value of seeds, that we've talked a lot about the nutrition quality. Um, and to prepare for our class today, I was doing some research and I was looking at all the different seeds and, kind of the nutrition breakdown. And we talked about that a little bit in our last class. And we could break it down and have all the slight differences. But if you were going to say what you thought made up seeds, what do you think most of the calories would come from? What would be the main, like if we think of the macronutrients, what's going to be most of the calories coming from?
The oil and the seeds.
Yeah. So if we think of the nutrition facts, we know that for the most part, when we look at the macronutrients, we think, okay, well, there's some protein in there. Carbs and fats are going to be the primary macronutrients that we are looking at when we're assembling our meals. And when we think of seeds and nuts, Seema is absolutely right. Fats are going to be the majority of the nutrition that comes from seeds. Yeah, we get it. But the nice thing is, whenever we look at powerhouse foods, we know that almost always a bunch of these macros are being hit. Whereas protein powder almost always is not going to have the wholesome food component. Because something else that isn't really in this macro phase is also the fiber and the micronutrients. So when you think about it, micronutrients are what we need a small amount of. Macronutrients are what we need a larger amount of. And we've talked a lot about, how much protein do we need in our day. And, kind of the school of thought is something like 1 gram per, kilogram or even pound body weight. But then that's where it starts getting really complicated. We think, well, what part of body weight? Would it be the whole body weight, even if we're a little over our, ideal? Or would we look at lean muscle mass? So if we weigh 100 pounds, but we only have 10 pounds of muscle, not going to happen. But just to say, then does that mean that we only get 10 grams of protein? Because we're going to do 1 gram of protein per that 1 pound of muscle. So that's where there's a lot of confusion. And that's why I'm not as interested in tracking and really breaking down that piece of the equation. I think instead we want to think of a well-balanced meal. We want to think of how to use foods that hit each of those carbs, proteins, and fats in the food. And so one thing I love about seeds is that we do get some protein. And in some of them, we even get a little bit of carbs, not very much. So, if we think of calorie for calorie, it's mainly fat, it's a little bit of protein, and it's a little bit of carbs. So what I'm going to show today are some snack foods that blend together the seeds, which is going to be primarily the fats, and all kinds of micronutrients, not to mention the fiber, because these are going to be whole seeds and nuts. And then we can add in things like honey and maybe some fruits, certainly some dates and prunes. If you've ever tried my Parker bars, that's the whole idea around the little blend of this snack food. It's got a little bit of everything in it, so it becomes easy to eat and enjoy. Because ultimately we want the nutrition of the whole food to be fairly complete. Now, we've also talked about how the amino acids don't have to be fully loaded in every meal. We talked about the essential amino acids and the non-essential amino acids. So we've talked about seeds and nuts being a little low in a couple. And so we want to combine them with foods that are going to have a little more. So if we were to combine a grain, even this one, which is kind of a pseudo grain, quinoa. I love quinoa because it really is a seed, but we treat it like a grain, and we added it to other seeds and nuts. We'd get a complete protein, which is pretty awesome. Quinoa is really complete on its own. If we did something like beans and rice together, those combinations make a complete protein. And so I love the fact that the animal kingdom isn't even involved. Now, when we add seeds on top to maybe our beans and rice, if you've tried my red beans and rice, it's kind of a popular Southern dish. It's already a complete protein. If it's missing any kind of minerals or micronutrients and you have seeds, maybe you have a seedy cracker that goes along with it, now you've got a great meal. So this becomes a fantastic combination, just like when we add a grain to the seeds and the nuts. Yeah. So I'm so glad you brought that up. And I love it when you all do bring good questions to discuss, because truly, when we start thinking about how to implement our discussions into your daily life, that's when I feel like we've really made an impact. And so if you're exercising, do you need more protein? That's a very subjective question. That would depend on how much you're already getting, right? If you're already getting enough, you don't need to necessarily increase it. So that's where probably doing a calorie and a daily review of your intake might help. And so that's where I'd love to sit down with you and we could look at, what is your typical day? Are you getting complete amino acids? Are you getting plenty of complex carbohydrates? Are you getting plenty of micronutrients in order to help your body with the added activity that you're asking it to do? And so whenever we want to have well-balanced nutrition, we got to think about what your base needs are, and then we're going to do extra for your activity. That's what I really love, is when we start thinking about what's your base needs. And of course, we've talked about the amino acids, and we think of complex carbohydrates and the essential fats. And then, okay, what else are we doing beyond our normal daily activities? And that's when we look into it. And so we wouldn't necessarily say only extra protein or only extra carbs or fats. We would again want to do a balance of all three in order to increase those base needs. And again, this is very subjective because it depends on what you've been doing. Okay? Questions about that? So the whole goal of these classes is that I help you think about ways to very easily start to increase your nutrient quality so that those base needs are easily met. And then you might only need to do a little bit of extra hydration when you start increasing your activities. Because the body is so good at storing amino acids throughout the day. So, even if you don't have all the amino acids at breakfast and then maybe your lunch, you have the balance or the complement of those amino acids, your body's set. Same thing with the healthy fats. And so the good news is there's lots of ways to make this happen and have a well-balanced diet. Seeds and nuts are absolutely the king and queens of the powerhouse food list. So that's what I wanted to play with a little today. So now I'm going to put together a couple little recipes and some basic principles around creating some healthy foods to go. So there is sesame seed and honey. There's a really cool little Greek snack food that really only uses these two ingredients, and the ratio is going to be what's important. So it's 1.5 cups of your seeds to 1/2 to 3/4 cups of honey. That seems like a lot, right? But the good news is the complex sesame seed is going to give you lots of nutrients in there, and you don't need a lot. So honey, you can adjust if you need it to be a little less sweet. And
Would you use honey or is maple syrup?
you could use maple. This particular this is a real traditional Greek dish, and I'm going to give you the name of it in just a second. But it's real traditional, and they just use honey. Remember, I love honey because it's considered a prebiotic. So it's a sweetener, but it has good qualities in it that really do keep your biome happy. And so that's, I think something that we always try to incorporate. Another one is when we use several nuts and seeds, and maybe even use dates or prunes as the sweetener. So in the next one I'm going to show you, it's going to have pureed or, processed fruit. And the whole thing's going to go in there. So here in my dates, which I'm really not an expert in using dates. I haven't used them nearly as much as prunes, but I thought it'd be kind of fun just to experiment with this one as an option. So some kind of pureed fruit and seeds, nuts, salt, and maybe some sweet spice or some other kind of flavor enhancement. So some kind of spice. Now, I've made the sweet spice because at Powerhouse Bakery, I think we have so much fun with combining all the warm spices. What are the warm spices? Anybody want to guess? Yes, cinnamon. Yes. How about star anise and anise? They are different. Star anise is different than just anise, strangely enough. So any combination of these warm spices that you like, you could add nutmeg, you could add coriander, but definitely include some of these spices when you're creating your dishes, because remember, anytime you add spice, you can decrease the amount of sugars that you use. And when you use nuts for making some kind of either granola or little snack bar, I recommend you get organic and raw. Oops, yeah. It's important because we're going to be already cooking them. I'm going to show you in a minute how to toast the nuts a little bit in a skillet. So, you could add the flavor in the toasting phase, or you could just keep them lightly toasted and add the flavors in the next step. But it's important to go ahead and get them raw so that you can do your own cooking. And something else to think about when you're buying seeds and nuts, the reason why I like to do organic is because the fat component of the plant tends to really absorb any of the potential pesticides and herbicides. It really absorbs into the plant, and it's kind of concentrated in the fat. So it's a good reason to go ahead and choose organics when you're getting nuts. Same thing with the seeds. So whenever you can, getting organic. Didn't spell that right. Organic. Now, other thing, if you're getting some of the sun butters or sesame butter, also look for the non-GMO label. So again, we've kind of talked about all this, and now I'm trying to really bring it together and help you see how we can use some of these ingredients to really get the most out of our creations and our snacks. So again, when I did the Powerhouse Bakery items, the Parker bars, I pureed cherries. Cherries are a very high phytoestrogen food. I also used organic blueberries. Again, a very high phytoestrogen. So we've been talking about those fruits being key. So whenever you're going to sweeten something, cherries and blueberries are a great choice. Dates don't really show up there, but they're still a very high fiber food. So that makes it a good one too. So kind of my top picks here are going to be listed: cherries, blueberries, and of course you could use dates, but I also love to use the dried plums. That's a little more stylish name than prunes. Whenever people hear prunes, they think, okay, I don't need that, right? But they're still good. And of course dates are too. So when you're picking your ingredients, high quality, organic, raw, good quality spices. Get the whole spices if you can and grind them yourself. Really important to do. And that way, whatever combination you end up doing is going to be great. And now you get to play with the flavors and the textures to let it kind of be modified according to how you want to be able to pack the food and travel with the food. And so we're going to bake an example, and I'm going to show you. We're going to put it in the toaster oven, my little baking pan. And we're going to cover with parchment, and we're just going to press in our little granola and bake it. And it'll take a little while to cool, but you're going to see the whole process. And then after class, I want you to get to sample some of our products that we're doing here on a regular basis, so you can see the variation of the ingredients as well as the cooking process. The other tool of the trade is going to be my handy dandy little food processor here. And it kind of leads me to our next series that I'm really excited about. We're going to have Brenda Morgan as a guest speaker next week. And so we're going to really start digging into what tools are going to really help our meal prep. You know, we've learned a lot about the types of foods, the why, and now we're going to do some of the how. And I think this is going to be a really fun entrance into the whole process, because I want us to have a good feel for the ingredients. And of course, you can get all kinds of recipes on Pinterest and the like, but I first really wanted us to play around with the ingredients and kind of get a feel for what we can do with them. You'll see that the chia seeds make a great gel. So we thicken the chia seeds with a little cherry juice, and that makes a great glue for making any kind of dish that needs to stick together. But it's not imperative, because again, the pureed fruit would really help too.
On the sesame seeds, that 1.5 cups, how much do you actually eat it once you make it? You know what I mean? Is there...
Yes. So Irene is asking a great question. She says, what's the portion size? Because she's scared of how much this is, right? And we're looking at, you know, in some worlds this would be, oh my goodness, I'm eating sugar and fat, right? So there's so many different ways to think of, sugar and fat. Nuts are primarily fats. Honey is, let's face it, it's all sugar. And so portion is key, always, always. Anytime we talk about our best foods list, we're always emphasizing the importance of portion. But something that I really can't overemphasize, and that is when you get a food that's really satisfying and it's full of nutrients, it's very easy to eat less of it because you feel more satisfied. So, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 little squares of something is going to be a great way to make sure that you are getting the nutrients, both macro and micro, to satisfy that's cravings, and then you can move on. The 100-calorie snacks crack me up because nobody ever stops with one package of the 100-calorie snack. And it's designed that way because it has food cocaine wrapped all around it. High salt, high fat, high sweet, with empty nutrient quality. And so the brain goes, wait a minute, where's the meat? Where's the good stuff? And so your cravings are not satisfied. So let's have some fun and we'll do some cooking. I've brought with me some of my raw cashews, and I've got some sunflower seeds, and some, look at these beautiful pistachios. So one thing I do love is whenever we're creating something to eat, we want the eyes to get to eat first. Thank you, ma'am. That's perfect. And so it's really fun to be able to think of the end product. And that's something that I gotta tell you, Pinterest has done a good job with their pictures, right? With social media, and you know, just we have eye candy all the time on the internet. And so thinking through how do we make them really beautiful, I think is a great and important step. So if I start with my cashews, I'm just gonna let them toast a little in here while we continue to chat. And again, these are unsalted and they're raw. I'm gonna put a little bit of pistachios in there. I love these. And a little bit of almonds. So I have the temperature on low, medium low. And you know, sometimes people will say, well, how much or how long do we let them toast? And it could be as little as 3 to 4 minutes, maybe as much as 5 to 6. But I'm gonna just go by the aroma. When it starts smelling good, it's almost there. If it starts smelling burnt, rats. It's been too much. And so, you know, you just kind of want to watch them, let them kind of stir around a little bit, but for the most part, they just kind of hang out and start to toast. So I'm going to keep that going while I do some of my beautiful dates. So what I've done is I've pulled these out of the container, and I can't remember honestly if they are pitted or not. So I am going to make sure that I check, because it would be a nasty disaster if I put pits into my beautiful little NutriBullet. Now these are pretty easy. Yep, and look, there is a pit. So never forget to pull that pit out. These are pretty dry, so I asked Mary to help me and grab a little bit of honey so that we could have some juice. So she set me up. And, you know, I've had some experience with my NutriBullet. It does a really good job, but sometimes it gets dry and all the ingredients kind of get stuck in there. So again, when I'm creating, I'm not following a specific recipe. We're learning about the ingredients. And of course, I've read lots of recipes and we make something very similar. But I really want you to kind of just let the science happen in your kitchen. And so the mise en place is the first, and really getting a feel for your ingredients. So making sure you don't have pits, that's number one before we put it into the NutriBullet. And as we kind of think through the sweetness factor, dates are very high in natural sugar and they're very high in minerals. So we don't need a lot, but I've de-pitted probably about 6. And now I'm going to add a little bit of my tart cherry. And while I'm not a big fan of drinking juices, having it a little bit as a way to mix my product along with some honey is going to be a great way to get a gel. So I'm going to add in, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3 dates. I didn't use them all. 3 dates. And so that we can repeat it if it actually turns out good. I am going to measure my cherry juice. I'm going to start small with a tablespoon and a half. There we go. Tablespoon and a half. And a little bit of my honey. Now I could use agave nectar. Of course I could use maple syrup. All of those are excellent. I just happened to grab this one first. So again, I'm going to start out pretty small. Let's go with 2 tablespoons. Now I didn't make the sesame one yet because I know that that's a very popular recipe. I wanted you to experiment with me in just doing one with these great ingredients. So the sesame to honey ratio is a great recipe, but I'll give you that one later. So here's my small amount. Oh, can you start to smell? Starting to get, ooh, a little toasty. It's been about 3 minutes, so yeah, it's coming along. I don't really want them to get brown, so that's why I'm watching the temperature, and I'm telling you, our nose is a great guide. So probably by the time I whip this up, it'll be ready to take off. All right, I'm going to pop this in. Yeah, see, it kind of gets stuck in there. But that's okay. See, but it makes a great little gel. So now I'm going to drop it in. It's starting to smell like nicely toasted nuts. I hope. Yes. So now I think I've got the ratio down. I'm going to add a little bit of cinnamon now, and then I'm going to do 1 or 2 more batches of this same ratio because I really like it. And so what I'm looking for is it's not too runny. It's got a nice gel consistency. And so in a minute here, I'm just going to mix in my nuts. But I think I'll do a little bit more. And for the purposes of our recipe, I'm going to measure out how much of the nut mixture, and then of course my sesame seeds will go on top of that. So this is probably about 2 tablespoons total after it's been blended. All right, let's double check on our toasted nuts. As I'm looking at the nuts, I don't see any browning, so that's good. And the aroma is fabulous. I might give it another 30 seconds. 30 seconds while I add in my touch of cinnamon to my gel mixture and my sesame seeds. So again, as you're taking notes, I'm going to do a half a teaspoon of cinnamon into my gel mixture. And I'm going to do 1 more batch of my little slurry, if you will. So I've got 1, 2, 3 more dates. And this time I'm going to add in some of my seeds. So I've got my hemp hearts and I've got my beautiful sesame seeds. So I'm going to add in 1/3 of a cup of my sesame seeds. I didn't put these in the skillet because the way that I purchased them, they were already toasted. So that's why. So I'm going to go ahead and blend these, and then the hemp hearts I'm going to leave whole. So again, it'll just give us a nice variation of the texture. Ooh, these are smelling good. What do you think? I think they're ready. They smell really good just before, you know, anything going over the top. So I'm going to pull it off, turn off my burner, and do one more batch of cooking. So we'll do our honey. And let's go ahead and do 2. So keep track of your notes. 2 tablespoons more of honey, and I'll go ahead and do 2 tablespoons of the cherry juice. There we go. Get it all off of there. So the sesame seeds will, I think, help in the mixing ability as well. This is going to be my gel. So just like when we do the Parker bars, I soak chia in cherry juice, but I don't do any of this stuff. So I think it's kind of fun to see how this is going to turn out different. Oh yeah, I love the consistency now. I can tell it's a little bit more fluid. It's got some great texture from those seeds. So now I'll pour it out and mix it together. So I'm mixing it in with the cinnamon. And this is where I could add in some star anise. I could add in cloves. I'm telling you, I love adding coriander too. I have a new customer or client that has a severe allergy though. So I've been so leery about putting coriander in anything. So be careful with some of your friends and family. Surprisingly, if they have an allergy to spices, that's one that I'm really surprised with. Okay, I think that looks good. I'm going to use my spatula and get the last little bit. So texture variation, I think, makes it really nice. I could have chopped some of those nuts a little bit, but again, I just use different size nuts to create that variation, so it's a little less production that's needed. Get the last little bit out of here. We do our Goa Nuts granola in a similar way too, in that we use a gel that we mix with honey and the mighty seeds. So see, that looks fantastic. I think I have a whole date that didn't get chopped up, but we're just going to leave them in there. All right, so now I'm going to mix my nuts in with this. And we'll put the hemp hearts right on top without having any added. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is put it in a bowl so you can see it even better. I'm going to do a little batch at a time. And it'll be so fun to see how they mix together. I'm going to press it into my baking pan and we'll be able to put it in the toaster oven. So I've got whole almonds. I could actually do almond slivers too if you have those handy. I think that would be wonderful. And I want you to see the volume so you can understand the ratio of our gel paste that we just made along with our toasted nuts. So you can kind of see, I'd call that about 2.5 cups. What do you think? I'll get the rest of them in there. Okay, now we're going to mix in our beautiful gel. Now in some recipes, I've seen them making bars and they add flour. I would rather us not use flour. I'd rather us just keep it all nuts and seeds if possible. Just because it keeps it a little bit purer. But see, I think that ratio is going to be right on. So now I'm just folding it in, getting it well connected to all that yummy juice. I bet this wouldn't even need to be cooked. I think we could even let it get cold or maybe even room temperature. And it would be really a yummy little granola. But I think cooking it's probably going to make it less sticky. Oh, and it smells so good. All right, I think that looks really good. We've got even moisture all around the nuts. I love it. So now I'm going to add it in to my baking pan with my hemp hearts. Yeah, that looks so good. So even if you didn't make it into an actual bar, this would be a fabulous crunchy granola just to let dry out in a low temp oven and add it to a trail mix. So make sure you can see that. Look how pretty that's looking. I'm going to put the hemp hearts right on the top. So I didn't really have another dried fruit, but I suppose we could add in something like coconuts. You could certainly add in dried cherries. There's my hunk of date. I'm going to take him out. But I love how it's perfect ratio of the gel to the nuts. And now let's add in our hemp seeds. So last time we spoke, I was saying that I had never found any unshelled sesame seeds. Has anybody found any unshelled sesame seeds? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why that would be so hard to find, but I was not able to. Okay, look how pretty, right? So we're going to toast that up. It'll take probably about 12 minutes to toast, and so I'm going to put it in the oven, and we'll get to experiment with it right after it's cooked. So that is a beautiful one. The next thing I'm going to do is kind of reverse the mix. Now I'm going to do, oh yeah, that'd be great, Mary. Also, I was going to do my toaster oven, but that's even better. So let's bake it at 350 for about 8 minutes. Okay, thank you, Mary. All right, so now we're going to go the other direction and start with seeds. So I'm going to toast the sesame seeds. And let's go ahead and we'll be official. I'll measure it out for you. I think I'm going to start with 2/3 of a cup. There's 1, 2, 2/3 of a cup. Stir those around just a little bit and let them toast. I'm going to add our sesame seeds, the famous darling of the nutrition world. I first started talking about the sesame seed because I was concerned that I had read that it was going to be considered an allergen. Yeah, and that's the case for sure. I guess the reality is why, and I don't think it's any different than any other nut, especially knowing that the fat kind of absorbs the nutrients. I mean, sorry, not the nutrients. It absorbs the pesticides and herbicides. And because it's in a lot of foods, we're starting to see more allergies. Do you have a question? Sunflower seeds and sesame seeds. So the first one was more of a nut base, and now we're going to do the seed base, which I'm kind of excited about because, again, I want you to fall in love with seeds. And people have eaten nuts, but I don't think they're as easily swayed to experiment with seeds. And so, and Seema, I bet in your culture, you use seeds quite a bit. I know with cooking, every day. Chutneys, yes, I love that. And so chutneys are a blend of savory and sweet, and it's got some dried fruit, right? So it's a great way to add flavor. It kind of reminds me of what we experimented with not long ago, which was the chow chow. As a condiment to meals that you eat often, just like with seeds, now you're getting that influence of those nutrients a lot more often, rather than, the only time we have cranberry sauces at Thanksgiving. How about we have a chutney every day at lunch? Or
so every day, every household will make 2 or 3 different kinds of chutneys.
Yes!
Sesame-based, coconut-based, and a savory one would be the cilantro, garlic, chilies.
Yeah, so what
Peanuts.
Seema is saying is that every day families make a type of chutney.
I have chutney with every meal, so it will be spread on bread, over rice.
Yeah, so cool.
So that's the amount. It's like a teaspoon of nuts is the average serving.
Now
per meal.
so that's what I love. I mean, when we get to learn from other cultures and know that something that's very common in one family and it's foreign in another family, it's so fun to get to share those ideas. So as my sesame seeds and sunflower seeds are toasting up ever so gently, I'm going to now mix the the sun butter in with this. Now I wanted you to see the joys of starting a jar of sun butter. So yes, it definitely has its challenges because look how runny the top is, all right? All that healthy fat, don't pour that out. It needs to be there. And so it's just really a matter of stirring it up and making, oh, I just got a piece in there. Make sure that once you do get it all stirred, you put it in the fridge and it'll last just fine. And where's my spoon? Looks like I already got it dirty. Same thing with good quality peanut butter. It's not going to stay together, and I don't think it's worth adding in the saturated fat for it to in fact stay together. I would much rather have this quality that's a little bit of a pain at first. See that sunflower butter, it's got all that oil. And then once you stir it, it stays stirred. It's actually best to do it storing the jar upside down, and then all the oil is at the bottom, so then it does not splash out, and it really makes it good. Because it's surprising how liquidy that oil is. So it can easily splash on your yellow top if you're not careful. There we go. It's starting to get into good solution now. So just a couple of stirs. See, I just slopped it out. A couple of good stirs, but see all the chunks I have in there? So I'm really going to have to be careful to get the bottom mixed up with the top. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to take a little bit of this and I'm going to add it to, are the seeds starting to smell good? I think they are. I'm going to add this to my NutriBullet and I'm going to make a new slurry. And so just a little different variation. So when I used the honey and the dates in this one, I'm going to use very little sweetener. We could even make this a savory, and we could turn it into like a cracker and add a little bit of a flour base. But right now I'm just going to use the fats from the sun butter and the sunflower seeds and the sesame seeds. I'm going to add the hemp parts at the very end, just like I did with that first one. There we go. So I added in about 2 tablespoons of my sun butter. And truth be told, I think this one has a little bit of sugar added. I'm going to double check. Yeah, it has a little bit of sugar. In a 2 tablespoon serving, the added sugar is 3 grams. So not a lot, but yeah, it's there, which all the more reason to not add it in if we don't have to at this stage. So I've got my butter. I'm going to add a little bit of the juice. My tablespoon. So no honey, just a little bit of cherry juice. Again, just to kind of work with the texture. 1, 2 tablespoons of cherry. My clients that are struggling right in the middle of treatment, one of my favorite things to recommend is frozen cherries. They are so good and easy to tolerate, so I definitely encourage using cherries in all ways you can. Ooh, it's starting to smell good. I'm going to pull it right off. Do you get that little bit of heat? Nobody's brown yet, but they were thinking about it. So pulled it off. Yes, gorgeous. Okay, let me get this going. Yes, beautiful. And I'm going to get us a fresh container because I want you to see how pretty these toasted seeds are. And again, I use these on salads. Gosh, when they're toasted like this, and you could add cumin, like Seema was saying. I mean, using those wonderful Mexican and South American spices are so good. And then it becomes a great fusion opportunity if we add cumin alongside some of the sweet spices. All right, so there we go. Our beautiful seeds. Yeah, I love that. And we're going to add in. So again, what we're doing here is we just kind of flipped it around. Instead of doing the primary as nuts, now we're doing the primary as seeds. And nice, you know, is that some people, if they have an allergy to nuts, they just might be okay with seeds. And so that's a great thing. So probably about 2.5 tablespoons of the liquid. And again, I want it to be kind of thick. This one could easily cook, or we could just let it freeze. You know, something we've learned with the Parker bars, my regular recipe was to cook them for about 8 minutes. And it's plums and cherries and oats. This one that we're doing today doesn't have any grain, but it actually tastes really good, not cooked at all. So definitely workable. Okay, so I want to hold this up so you can see it, kind of the amount of liquid that we have from that gel. And now I'm going to stir it together. Oh, actually I got a little bit more on the bottom here. Don't want to leave any of that good stuff. So now I'm thinking it's more like a 1/4 cup. I'm going to show it up here and you guys can make your own assessment. If I had my scale, I guess I could measure it by weight so you could know exactly. But who wants to do exacts? That's no fun. Okay, so you can kind of see how much I got there. Now I'm going to stir it around. And this would be a fantastic crust for a crisp also. So again, a seed-based crisp. You could put berries or frozen cherries on the top and bake it. And oh my gosh, that would be fantastic. Yeah, so look, this is coming together really nicely. It's nice and moist. If I wanted to press this into a pie pan that has been, you know, maybe prepped with either parchment or some nonstick spray or just some olive oil, this would be a fantastic crunchy brittle. Very little sugar. Yeah, that looks so good. Okay, let me put this into a clean tray so you can kind of see what it looks like. And I'm going to sprinkle it again with the hemp hearts. So a wonderful base of seeds, no nuts. And we can bake this and make it crunchy like a brittle. We could certainly chill it down. We could use it as a crumble over yogurt. Oh, that would be so good. Here's my spatula here. So I definitely want to hear if you guys try these recipes, and also would be really fun is to hear what kind of variations you're doing for your own. Any thoughts of maybe other add-ins that you could see putting in with the seedy blend? Could certainly add in oats and make it like an oat cookie. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so see, I'm just gonna press it down in there, and so when it bakes, even if I made it a thinner layer, it could be a wonderful crunchy little brittle that's low in sugar. So there you have it. I'm gonna pop this in the oven as well. If I wanted to add that little sprinkle of hemp hearts on it, it would just give it that exotic look. I could even do some of my sweet spice on the top, if it's handy. Sprinkle it. Now we've got layers of flavors. We've got the crunchy, lightly sweet, savory, and full of nutrition. And lastly, look at this beautiful brittle that Mary cooked off for us. I'm gonna lift it right off here so it's still slightly soft, and oh my gosh, so good. Let's have a sample. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.